Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Rapport with the Men's Council. We're back with you a little over 2 weeks since we first introduced ourselves and began this exercise, discussing with you, as it were, matters involving and relating to men. If you recall, last time we discussed the role of men in their various capacities as husbands and brothers and sons and fathers and partners. And we looked at a number of issues that attend to that particular remit. We're going to continue the discussion this evening, and we apologize again for not having in place the relevant mechanisms so that you can rapport with us more in dialogue form. That is to say, you call us and you express your sentiments, whether it be a comment, ask a question, and so on. We again wish to say we are sorry that we don't have that in place, but I have to show you sooner or later that will in fact be in place, and you'll be able to communicate with us as we discuss. We wanted to talk a little bit about whether the role of men differs according to their location and culture. You know, we live in a world that is said to be getting smaller, which is interesting because the prices, the cost of getting from one place to another is getting higher. So it's a kind of a paradox that despite the world being reduced in terms of technology and the ease of access from one to another, we still find it so very expensive to move from one place to another. But the role of men, as we discussed last issue on rapport with the Men's Council, does it differ depending on where one lives? Does it differ depending on the cultural dynamics of the location? Or is it that there are rules, that there are principles, that there are roles that are universal, that stand the test and that apply no matter where? You know, we live in St. Kitts, which is a minuscule island which is not even located on a world map. And a lot of us tend to believe that what happens in St. Kitts is typical of what happens everywhere. I've had to spend a lot of time in my teaching career disabusing students of the notion that what happens in 2x4 St. Kitts is what is the norm and the rule everywhere else. So that when you tell some person, for example, that in some cultures men greet one another with a kiss, the response is they're taken aback, they're aghast. What? When you tell them that in some cultures men wear skirts, they don't believe it, they can't fathom it because they're so accustomed to the little world here in St. Kitts. So what we do here in St. Kitts and in the Caribbean, because what happens in one island in the Caribbean tends to be replicated throughout the rest of the Caribbean. In terms of how men are looked upon, in terms of how men execute their role, last time we spoke about men being essentially providers and protectors. I have since come to the conclusion that men also work as procreators, promoters, and pastors. And not pastors in the religious sense, because a pastor really is one who shepherds. A pastor is one who leads. A pastor is one who guides. A pastor is one who teaches and instructs. And so when we speak of a male or of a man's pastoral duties, we're not talking about his being in charge of a church, like we think of Pastor Brown of Church of God, or we think of Pastor Benjamin, or Pastor, I don't know his name there, of the Pastor Herbert of the Resident Holiness Church, and we think of Pastor William Manasseh Connor of Baptist fame. Not that kind of pastorship. In the same way that it is not, a teacher is not confined to one who is engaged in the formal teaching learning process. In fact, a child's first teacher is 99% of the time his mother, once his mother doesn't die in childbirth. So we look at men not only as providers and protectors, but also as procreators, because God asked Adam and Eve to, God gave them an injunction to multiply and reproduce and replenish the earth. And so a woman cannot do it by herself in the same way a man cannot do it by himself, which is why it makes a nonsense out of the creative process and the creative intent for a woman to marry a woman and for a man to marry a man. It makes rubbish of the Creator's demand and instruction that we procreate, that we have coitus, and we produce children to populate the earth. So men serve a critical role in that. And also as promoters, men must work as, and they're all P's, by the way, protectors, providers, pastors, procreators, and promoters. Men must promote the family. Men must promote the principles for which they stand. Men must promote the programs to which they champion. Men must promote the family as the basic and most important unit in society. Men must promote spirituality. Men must promote discipline. Men must do all of that. And the question is whether, if a man is in St. Kitts, whether those roles differ fundamentally or slightly or at all from the role of a man in Afghanistan or in Rwanda or in Uruguay or in Mongolia. It is my belief, ladies and gentlemen, and I believe I can defend this if push came to shove, that these functions that I just outlined, these 5 basic functions, that they obtain everywhere. And it is because men generally, because remember there are exceptions to every rule and we have to speak generally, men generally have absconded from these duties and they want to absolve themselves of these responsibilities. I believe this is what the crux of the issue, why we have so much violence and aggression and indiscipline in society. A lot of social indiscipline, a lot of violence and aggression coming from young people, particularly men. And it is my thesis that it is because men have no longer embraced these roles, they do not understand these roles and they don't know how to execute them, since one cannot teach what he does not know, as procreator, provider, protector, pastor, and promoter, because man does not fulfill these roles, why we have so many problems in society. So by extension, if we were to get that miracle, that revolution that we would like to see, and men begin to apply themselves, a man begins to apply himself and to perform these various duties, I am convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that society will return to levels of sanity, decency, peace, prosperity, and absence of violence and aggression on a scale unprecedented in human history. That is my view.
No. Remember, Blake, you have mentioned a few buzzwords in speaking about men and the role in society. And I like the fact that the nouns that you use, all those nouns begin with the letter P. Protectors, procreators, promoters, pastors, and
Promoters and providers.
And so, depending upon the geographical location or the culture, I do agree with you that men ought to be placed in these positions, be positioned, as it were, to take responsibility in these areas. It differs, yes, realistically. When you travel to various countries, different countries, you may see the dynamics being different, but generally speaking, a man should be a promoter, promoting values, promoting principles, not promoting violence and lewdness and immorality and all of that. Men must be protectors. Men must be able to save the family, you know, when there's danger, when there is harm, protect the children. And then the one that you caught mentioned the procreators. A lot of men would put up their hand and say, yes, I'm in that. I want to carry on my line, my lineage. I want to, you know, when I leave this earth, you know, my genealogy continues. Biological, you know, a lady said to me that a lot of men are just sperm donors. But when you talk about procreators, I think you're looking at it in a positive light as a man being a procreator. And then, well, you talk about the pastor and so, not in the sense of the office of a pastor, but being there to shepherd and take care, you know. So it should obtain everywhere. I want to ask you though, why do you think it is not happening everywhere? You know, why do you think that in some cultures, some localities, you might find that the role differs? You know, is it because of politics or just human nature? Something.
Well, excuse me. Man is a product of nurture and nature. Man is a product of his environment. Man is a product of society. Man is a social being. And children learn from example. In fact, we like to say they close their ears. Children generally would close their ears to advice, but they open their eyes to example. And so a man becomes the output, the end result of what his society trains and molds and prepares and makes him out to be. So that if in the St. Kitts context, a boy is trained, or a boy is molded, the boy is led to believe that it is his right, it is his duty, imagine that, to run wild, to have as many girls as he wishes, to treat a woman merely as a sexual object, and to treat the fairer sex, the man being the sterner sex, the woman being the fairer sex, to treat a woman as being inferior, as being of less or lesser value. If he's trained that way, he grew up seeing his sisters having to stay in the home and wash and cook and play with dolls when they were younger and be like mommy. But he as a boy was allowed to be up in the street with his friends and run around and light bombs and take risks and be adventurous and adventuresome. He grows up like that, and chances are he's going to pass those beliefs on to his offspring, especially his male offspring. If, on the other hand, in another culture, men are trained and taught to be co-helpers in the home, so that they're not allowed to run around. They have to stay at home and help with the animals, help in the home, help their sisters, help the mother. Then he grows up recognizing and understanding that his duty is not just to be out there and to be quote unquote macho and manly, but he has a domestic part of him. There is the female side, quote unquote, of him. And by the way, researchers have long established that every male has a feminine or female aspect to his being, and every woman has a male aspect to her being. And it is how men are allowed to exercise and to demonstrate that femininity that determines whether he is a real man or a full man. This is why some men have no problem at all talking certain topics. They have no problem at all wearing a skirt if it in a play, for example, or to make a point, because they're satisfied within themselves. They know that they are fully masculine, quote unquote. Right?
So you're saying is the teaching, the instruction that
I'm trying to answer your question by saying that it is the culture that shapes the individual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, more so than genes, more so than chromosomes. I believe it is the culture. It is more nurture that dictates the output, the shape of the male, of the individual, more so than nature, because as the Bible itself instructs, train up a child in the way you think he should go, or in the way God wants him to go. But train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he's going to remain like that, by and large.
So in St. Kitts, do you see family life as marriage and family life being promoted among men, and do you see men leading, having the responsibility as a man, looking towards having a good family and marrying and getting children and setting that example?
I think that too many men have a skewed idea, a skewed perception of what their role is, of what their roles are. I think that too many men have not been taught by their parents. They've not been taught by their pastors. They've not been taught by their teachers as to what it really takes, what it means, what is expected of them to be men. Not just males, but men. And so we find that in St. Kitts, there are so many single family homes, 99% of which are led by females. We find there's such a high rate of concubinage. In other words, there's a very small percentage of marriage. And by the way, I remember growing up, almost every week, we used to hear the horns blowing, signaling a marriage has taken place.
Yeah.
And you people outside and you see the cars, a long train of cars, with balloons and so on, and so on. I can't recall the last time I saw that. So marriages are not as prevalent as they were before. But at the same time, rates of divorce have skyrocketed. So it means that the family unit is getting weaker and weaker. And it is therefore not surprising that because the family unit is disintegrating slowly but surely, problems in the society commensurately and concomitantly grow and increase. Because the family is the basic unit of society. It is in the family where principles are taught, where behaviors are modeled, where right and wrong are taught, are exemplified, where values, where morals and so on are inculcated. And if you don't have that environment within which to pass these kinds of important things into the child, if that does not exist, then the child goes up in a vacuum. The child goes up believing that it's a free-for-all, he does as he pleases, and there's nobody to whom he has to account.
Would you say that men do not have very good choices in terms of who to marry?
I mean, in St. Kitts generally, I think in some countries men have some decent choices. One would argue, there's some who argue that the pool of available women who sport qualities of decency and modesty and chastity and so on is very, very small. In fact, I've heard other principals, other teachers say that if a guy wants to marry a virgin, he better find one under 15. Because it seems like almost 100% of girls, by the time they're 16, certainly by the time they're adults at 18, they would have had a sexual experience, and as we say, the stone would have been rolled away. Of course, I know, and I must hasten to add that there are some females who retain their virginity until marriage or sometimes until death. But those are this sort of small minority that it seems to be statistically insignificant, because the society becomes so sexualized in music, in posters, in books, everywhere you turn. Everything is sex, sex, sex. The way the folks dress themselves or undress themselves, I think it's more apt, at carnival time and so on, leaves nothing to be desired. And so, in terms of finding a woman who views herself as something precious, I used to tell my students that their body is the only thing that they own. They don't own anything else but their body. Their parents don't own their body. Their friends, their husbands don't own their body. It is they themselves own their body. And so because their body is the only thing they own, it's a precious possession. They must be careful with whom they share that possession, so they don't go and respond in the positive or in the affirmative to every man who says, who makes an invitation. But I wanted to make a point here. Because men are so important as procreators, because women cannot do it by themselves, I think it has been it has been peddled for too long, a kind of nonsensical position that war is dangerous because too many women and children are killed. I hear people talking this all the time as though it is okay for men to be killed, but this war is brutal and this war is really unjustified. This war should end. Why? Because look at the number of women and children who are being killed. In other words, 10,000 men being killed, 10,000 men being killed every day or every week or every month is not a problem. But you can't have killing 100 women and 100 children. I hate to hear that.
Yes.
It's as though we men, we are expendable.
Yeah.
So kill all 40 men, but don't be killing women and children, because how can society exist without men?
I don't know.
So I think that narrative should cease.
Yes.
Right.
But is it the maintaining the family unit? If, as you mentioned, the scenario that you described, if there's no family unit, if there is no marriage, if relationships are not working out, but men can you honestly say that they are charged to do this? They can do that when with the absence of the family unit? Because what I'm saying is that as I look around here, particularly in St. Kitts and Nevis, more so in St. Kitts and Nevis, I find that there are many single parent families. The households, you find a woman has 2 children and she's led. She has the charge of taking responsibility, paying bills, providing, nurturing, maintaining, providing resources, buying books, school books, and all of that. That woman is struggling, and sometimes when the relationship ends, she has to find another man to pick up the strain and help her to be able to survive. So if there is no family unit, if there is no family structure, can you really blame men or charge men to maintain a family unit?
Well, as I said earlier, I don't want to be going around in circles. I think because there are no fathers and mothers bonding together to help train children as a single unit, we have problems with the children being given false impressions with respect to what their role is in society, what their purpose in life is. So it's kind of cyclical, where this does not happen, so it leads to that. Or because it does not happen, it does not lead to that, to this. It leads to that, but does not lead to this. And we have to begin somewhere. I believe we have to begin by recognizing that we are here on this earth because of Almighty God. So He put us here on earth for a particular purpose. He gave us some instructions as to how we should carry on, what we should be doing and should not be doing while we are on earth. Some people like to refer to the Bible as basic instruction before leaving earth. I don't know. But too many men, in particular, have no regard, have no interest in things religious, far as things spiritual. And I want to believe that that is one of the reasons why we have so many problems in society, because men tend not to gravitate towards things spiritual at any level close to what they ought to be. I mean, we visit any church, we visit any religious activity, and we know we are going to find 10 times as many women as men. Now, whether the women are genuine and whether they really fully understand what's going on and whether they're really truly in touch with their Creator, whether they're really spiritual more than religious, is a different discussion altogether. The fact of the matter is that they turn out in their numbers. Any church, every church. All right? And so, one of the questions I have been asking myself, and I think I'm going to continue to examine it, why are so few men in church? Whether the church worships on a Sunday, a Saturday, a Monday, or any day of the week, we don't find many men in church. You don't find many men in churches. And there must be a reason for that. I'd like us to discuss that next time around, to tell you the truth. What are some of the factors that predispose men to being absent from church and from things religious? And it seems to me, by the way, I want to make this point, and I will make it again, that only in Christianity do we find this trend of men being absent from places of worship. I mean, you go to mosques and shrines and temples and synagogues and so on. You find, in fact, men in Islam, you see them all the time. They're on their knees, kneeling 5 times a day, just as much or perhaps even more than women.
Yeah.
You go to synagogues in Israel and other major other countries with large Jewish populations, you find the men are there. Men turn out in their numbers. You go to India and other countries with large Hindu populations, you find the men are there in their numbers. In the houses of worship of their particular religion. But in Christendom, you find very few men in the church. I think the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, have a larger proportion of men in terms of their population, their church population. In other words, you might find as many as 45% of the population being men, whereas in some other churches, including the one I attend, it's less than 5%.
Yeah.
So,
well, maybe in the education system, we need to teachers, those who are charged with responsibility, need to tell the young boys and girls, tell the young boys that it is cool to go to church.
No, that shouldn't come from teachers. That should come from parents. That should come from the home. That's the point we're making. That it's a cyclical kind of thing. The children, the boys growing up in the home should be seen and accompanying their fathers to church. Like I took my children to church with me everywhere I went. I sent them to Sunday school. I sent them, I didn't go to Sunday school. I sent them to Sunday school. But I took them to church with me.
If they're not getting if they're not getting it in the home, the next place where they're often found is in the school.
Yes, I'm saying that the duty really belongs to the home. The Bible commands you must train up a child in the way he should go, and I believe that injunction is for parents more so than teachers. But some argue that God in His wisdom didn't say parents do this or parents do that. He just made a blanket statement: train up a child. In other words, all those of us in authority, whether it be as pastors, preachers, teachers, or police officers, any adult in authority in school, in the society, should assist in training up the child. But man, I believe that the society is experiencing a lot of problems in St. Kitts, in the Caribbean, around the world, because men have retreated from these 5 roles that I discussed before, and particularly they are not involved in things spiritual.
You talk about the mental well-being, the contributing emotionally, physically, mentally, and so on. You think that some of it is stemming from a mental health issue? No, I don't think so. I think it stems from a mental position, a mental platform that men adopt. But I don't think it has to do with mental health per se, because the question of mental health suggests something medical. I think it's the way men have been trained, and the media does not help in solving the problem. Churches are not helping. So I don't know where we're going to begin or how, but certainly we need a revolution. We need a turnabout in the way things are progressing or rather regressing, and we need men. This is why I'm a part of the Men's Council. I thought the Men's Council would be a good conduit to empower men to understand their role and to perform that role with dignity and decorum, with decency, and with good results. But I find that it's an uphill battle because generally men cannot be found when you want them and where you want them. And there is this pervasive belief that men are not to be told what to do. Men are supposed to be free to do as they please. And I think that's a serious problem. There's a quote I'd like to share. It says, "A man is called to be a servant leader, to take responsibility for his wife and his children, and to put their needs ahead of his own."
Absolutely. I like that. I agree with that.
And so, as we wrap up this discussion, I want to implore all the men who are listening and viewing, that it is your duty, it is your responsibility to ensure that you train up the children in the way that they should go, as the Bible says. That you, if you are a father, you are a builder. Your children will become what you make. Do your best. You're expected to do your best. You are charged. You have that responsibility. Be a man.
You're commanded to do the best. Yeah.
You're commanded to do your best. Be the leader whom God expects you to be. We want to thank you for viewing this presentation
Listening.
and listening. Of course, we'll be back, every other week. We will be here to discuss issues affecting men and boys. And we want to challenge the men to be strong, to be bold, to be courageous. We expected to have another episode within the next 9th of December, the next 2 weeks. And so we thank you very much once again for viewing and for listening. And we look forward to coming your way again with another edition.
Right. That edition, you might hear other voices. You may or may not hear mine. I think you will hear Brother Berridge is here, but you may or may not hear other voices. Be that as it may, we expect to be able to share with you something useful, and we hope to be able to have you communicate with us via the telephone. Thank you very much, and blessings.